Hello, I'm Bretton, one of our MCAT tutors here at Inspira Advantage, where we help students get to med school and other professional programs. Today, we're going to talk about the 4 important theories of emotion that you need to know to do well on the MCAT. Let's start with the simplest theory, the James Lange theory of emotion. This theory starts with some sort of stimulus called an arousal. Let's pretend that James saw a bear running at him. This is the first step in the emotional response, witnessing an external stimulus. This stimulus then leads to some sort of physiological response. In the case of the bear, this may be elevated heart rate, increased blood pressure, sweating, or even shaky knees. The final step of the James Lange theory is the interpretation of the emotion based on the physiological response. For example, one would say, my heart rate is beating, I'm sweating, my knees are shaking, therefore I am afraid. The next theory of emotion we are going to discuss today is the Cannon-Bard theory. This theory posits that we start with an arousal, such as, again, seeing a bear. One then simultaneously has both a physiological response and the interpretation of the arousal as an emotion. This means that one would start shaking at the knees and feel fear at the same time. A good way to remember the Cannon-Bard theory is to think about a cannon firing a bunch of mini cannonballs and hitting a ship in a spread out fashion. This symbolizes how the arousal, cannon firing, the cannonballs, hits both the physiological response and emotional interpretation at the same time. This half of the ship is physio, the other half is the emotional interpretation. The third theory of emotion needed to know for the MCAT is the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory. The Schachter two-factor theory adds in something new that neither of the previous theories had. This theory suggests that there is an important cognitive labeling step that precedes the experience of an emotion and occurs at the same time as a physiological response. It's basically the same as James Lange, except that the knees shaking includes cognitively thinking, I'm scared of this bear, and then an emotion is had. To explain this in an example, so let's draw this out here. The Schachter two-factor theory adds in something new that neither of the previous theories had. This theory suggests that there is an important cognitive labeling step that precedes the experience of an emotion and occurs at the same time as a physiological response. It's basically the same as the James Lange, except that the knee shaking includes cognitively thinking, I'm scared of this bear, and then an emotion is had. To explain this in an example, we will keep the bear. Step 1, I see a bear moving towards me. Step 2, my heart is pounding, and I'm afraid of bears. Step 3, I think I'm afraid. The final and often brushed over theory you need to know for the MCAT is the Lazarus theory of emotion. Lazarus theorized that there are 4 steps. We have a stimulus or arousal, then an individual creates a cognitive appraisal of the stimulus, then an emotional response is produced based on this cognitive appraisal, and finally, a physiological response is formed based on the emotional response. Notice how each step of this cycle builds on the one before it. To cognitively appraise, we need an arousal to appraise. To have an emotional response, we need to have a cognitive appraisal. And to have a physiological response, we must have first had an emotional response. This is a linear progression. Again, I want to remind you that a stimulus is any internal or external factor experienced by an individual. Cognitive appraisals are what a person thinks about a stimulus. Do they like it? Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Does it trigger memories? And the emotional responses are mental and biological reactions affected by pleasure, pain, and other feelings. An example of Lazarus would be George is playing outside when he sees a bear hiding in the grass. Stimulus. He sees that the bear is big, hairy, and has big teeth. And then he recognizes it as dangerous, having a cognitive appraisal of the stimulus. George then has an emotional response where he feels scared. I'll symbolize this by making him go, oh. Next, his pulse increases. He's having a physiological response to cognitively fearing the bear. So first step, saw the bear. Second step, thought about it being dangerous. Third step, being surprised. Fourth step, having an increase in heart rate, the physiological response. Now you know all of the theories of emotion the MCAT can and will test you on. Thank you so much for watching our video on the different theories of emotion, and I will see you next time.